In this video, we're going to talk about heat-related illnesses, recognizing signs of heat stress, and actions individuals can take to stay healthy on the job. One of the goals of this training is to bring to front and center the importance of addressing heat-related illnesses in dealerships, particularly for those who work in fixed operations, as you guys are at a higher risk of developing a heat-related illness as opposed to other departments or other industries. I'm also going to give a brief overview of different heat-related illnesses and basic initial triage steps so you know what symptoms to look out for and how to give somebody the treatment they need, at least until emergency responders can show up. And we're also going to talk about individual actions that you can take to reduce your heat exposure and stay cool on the job. Every year, MADA puts out a great deal of information on how to prevent heat-related illnesses in dealership employees. And that's because dealership employees are at a higher risk of getting a heat-related illness for a number of reasons. For one, many shops are not climate controlled, so it's hot and we lack air movement in a lot of areas. Furthermore, some employees are exposed to direct sunlight, whether it be intermittent, like going outside to pick up a car, or extensive, like a lot porter spending half the day out there. Furthermore, you guys know in Missouri we have high humidity. As we all say, it's not the heat, it's the humidity that gets you. And that's going to create higher heat stress levels on the employees. Another issue that we have to look out for is our aging workforce, which is not just a problem with dealerships, but all industries. And older adults are at a higher risk of getting a heat-related illness as well. And finally, it's the fact that you guys work hard. Your high workload or physical activity translates to metabolic heat, thus putting you at more of a risk of getting sick as well. So if you don't know what I mean whenever I say heat-related illness, really what I mean is heat stress, which, or as defined by OSHA, is an umbrella term used to describe a condition or process that can raise the deep core body temperature. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke are the two that I'm going to dive into in the most detail. For one, time-saving purposes, and two, because they are two of the most likely that people will run into on the job. Heat syncope is another word for heat fainting, which could be a byproduct of heat exhaustion or stroke. And of course, that's always a medical emergency if that happens. Heat cramps is a result of dehydration and lack of electrolytes in the muscles. Thus, we have a cramp, which most of you have probably had before. So cooling off, getting hydrated, taking in some electrolytes is the fix for heat cramps. And heat rash, depending on the situation, can be remedied from getting out of the heat, or could be as serious as having to go to a doctor. But like I said, I'm going to talk about heat exhaustion and heat stroke in the most detail. So heat exhaustion is less harmful than heat stroke, generally speaking, but it really depends on how far we let heat exhaustion go. As to how serious it can be. We can either treat ourselves or get treatment locally, or we'll have to go to an emergency room depending on how bad the situation has gotten. Because usually you can see heat exhaustion coming by your symptoms, and in a second I'll go over all of the different symptoms that could mean you have heat exhaustion. And they're not all going to come at once. It'll be one at a time or a few at a time, and you can intervene, or somebody else giving triage can intervene, and you'll end up being just fine. But heat exhaustion is essentially a blanket term that means that you've had a decrease in body water volume or blood volume and an excessive loss of body salts or electrolytes, as we commonly call them, sodium, potassium, magnesium. So you're dehydrated, and the amount that you're sweating out has exceeded the amount that you're taking in, thus leading to the symptoms of heat exhaustion. So what are those symptoms of heat exhaustion? Well, for one, your skin could become pale, cool, or it could become flushed in the opposite direction. It could be a headache, sweating or clammy skin, abdominal cramping, nausea and vomiting, weakness and lethargy, dizziness or confusion, and an elevated body temperature. So as you can see, this is a wide range of sickness or of symptoms, and the seriousness of your heat exhaustion corresponds to the seriousness of the symptoms that you're receiving at the time. And like I said before, you could have one of these symptoms that you can get on top of your heat exhaustion early and be fine, or you could be pretty far down the rabbit hole and you're going to need emergency treatment immediately. If you feel like you or someone else has come down with heat exhaustion, here's a basic list of things that you should do in that case. For one, you want to move to a cool or shaded area and sit or lie down with your legs slightly elevated. You want to loosen any clothing or remove any excess clothing to help cool you down. You should call for medical attention. Apply a cool compress, particularly to the armpits or to the groin, the places where you're going to be losing the most body heat, in order to bring that core temperature down. You want to sip cool water so it absorbs into your system, or an electrolyte beverage, like a sports drink is a great option, because that's not only going to give you the electrolytes that you're missing, that potassium, sodium, magnesium, but those are going to have sugar in there in the form of dextrose, which is closely related to glucose, which is going to give you what you need energy-wise if that's one of the problems that you're having. And again, if you do have problems with blood sugar, diabetes, whatever it might be, that's something to be aware of and let the people taking care of you that you have a problem with. Don't return to work for several hours until your symptoms are gone. If you're giving someone treatment, you never want to leave a victim alone who's suffering from heat stress of any sort. There's some horror stories of giving employees treatment, taking them back to a nurse's station or a bunk or something, and letting them rest and coming back to them being dead on the floor. So if you guys do have to give somebody treatment, make sure you don't leave them alone for any long periods of time whatsoever. Heat stroke is more serious than heat exhaustion. It is a medical emergency, and you need to call 911 immediately if you feel like you or somebody else is suffering from heat stroke, because it is fatal under the right circumstances, or it can cause damage permanently to the brain or other organs. It mainly affects people over 50 in the workplace, but it has been known to affect younger populations, particularly ones with pre-existing conditions or ones who haven't been taking care of themselves, i.e. going out and drinking the night before and being dehydrated. That's when you see it most in the workplace, and also in young athletes you'll see it, so it could be in totally healthy individuals as well. So what are the symptoms of heat stroke? For one, the skin is hot and dry. Usually the person has stopped sweating by the time they're getting treatment for heat stroke. One of the hallmark symptoms is a body temperature that is above 104 degrees, which is incredibly hot, and now you can see how brain damage or organ damage can be a result of having an actual heat stroke. You're going to have a rapid heart rate. Chills are a possibility, and the victim may be confused, dizzy, or have slurred speech. Seizures or loss of consciousness, or that syncope, is possible as well. If you feel like you or someone else is suffering from heat stroke, 911 needs to be called immediately, because this is now a life or death situation. The person needs to be moved to a cool, shaded area until help arrives. Same as with heat exhaustion, we want to remove restricted clothing, use compresses on those areas where we're going to be losing the most heat, the groin, the armpits, potentially the neck. We could use wet sheets or towels as well. If water is not available, we need to fan the person. And again, do not leave someone suffering from heat stress alone for any period of time. So whether we're talking about heat stroke, heat exhaustion, or even heat cramps, there are some things that we can do as individuals well before we even start feeling bad to prevent these heat-related illnesses. And I'm often asked, when do I need to start implementing these activities on my own? And the answer is usually it depends. Because if we're looking at it from a true OSHA standpoint, you need to take into account air movement and solar load, and we generally don't have the tools to measure that, and we usually don't know what that means. So to make it less convoluted, if you adapt that information that OSHA puts out, it comes down to a 91 degrees Fahrenheit heat index, which takes just your humidity into account, being the level where we should start thinking about implementing these activities. And anything greater than 115, we need to take extremely aggressive actions. So the first and most important thing we can do as individuals to prevent heat stress on the job is to hydrate. Nobody can hydrate for us. And if we start hydrating when we're thirsty or feeling symptoms of heat stress, it's probably too late. We need to start hydrating from the time we wake up in the morning till the time we go to bed at night. Urine should be frequent and light to clear in color, and for every pound we lose during physical activity through sweat, we should be consuming at least 20 ounces of fluid. Water is an excellent choice for hydration, and if you're working for less than an hour, it's probably the best choice. But if we're losing several pounds throughout the day in sweat, we should really think about sports drinks or electrolyte drinks to replace electrolytes or carbohydrates. Something else that we can do as individuals is proactively pace ourselves during hot weather. Take advantage of all the breaks that you get and take them as frequently as permitted. I'm not telling you to go out of your way to take a break without talking to your supervisor if it's not in your scheduled break time. But the more breaks that we can take in air conditioned or climate controlled areas where we can let our body temperature cool down, the better off we're going to be. We always need to let our supervisor know if we're not feeling well. In that case, they can take steps to make sure that you get the time that you need to cool down or administer triage if you are really hurting. Wear light colored and lightweight clothing as much as possible. I know many of you guys wear uniforms and you don't have a choice in what you get to wear, but as permittable, wear the light colored, lightweight clothing. Avoid alcohol, obviously, throughout the day, but the night before too. As you guys know, it'll dehydrate you and you're going to have a really bad day whenever that hot weather comes around. And that's often, in my experience, where I've had to give treatment to people for heat-related illnesses because of what they did the night before and not what they did during the day. Also, throughout the day, avoid large amounts of caffeine, coffee, teas. Those are diuretics and are going to cause you to lose more water throughout your system throughout the day. And avoid large amounts of sugar. Get plenty of sleep and eat a balanced diet. And this is all about recovery. As you guys know, sleep and diet are your best forms of recovery. So make sure you take advantage of those at night, especially whenever it's incredibly hot weather outside and you're at more of a risk of getting sick while on the job. Another thing you need to do is talk to your doctor about any medical issues that could affect your ability to work safely in extreme heat. Also, check your medications, including over-the-counter drugs, for warnings related to high heat conditions, and run that by your doctor while you're talking to them as well, because antibiotics, diabetes, medicines, diuretics, chemotherapy, antihistamines, just to name a few, are some of the drugs that have these interactions with high heat conditions. It would also be wise to let your supervisor know about any chronic health conditions you have, or if you're at risk for a heat-related illness. That way they know what to tell the first responders if you do take a dive on the job. If your work entails chemical exposure, and you have to wear PPE such as chemical-resistant gloves, aprons, paint suits, we need to talk to our supervisor about wearing that appropriate PPE. If you are going to be exposed to those chemicals, I promise you still need to wear them. But whenever we're not actively being exposed, it's always a good idea to take off any PPE that's restricting airflow. And I'll tell you right now, it's basically limited to just the ones that are chemical exposure, because those are the impermeable clothing type articles that are going to enhance heat-related illnesses. Your eye protection, your face protection, and most of the time your hand protection isn't going to be a factor. And finally, you need to watch out for your coworkers. If you see somebody who's struggling, they're excessively sweating, flushed, or they've stopped sweating, you need to bring it to their attention, let them know they should probably back off a little bit, or bring it to their supervisor's attention. People like myself have a hard time taking it down a notch whenever we're trying to get something done, and we can be stubborn about it. So just bringing it to our attention, and if we're not listening, bringing it to our supervisor's attention could definitely save a life. There is a great deal of PPE and tools available to employees to stay cool on the job. The technology is getting better and better every year from a safety and health standpoint. Do an online search for wearables. You'll find cooling vests, scarves, and other devices that can help you stay cool on the job. Cooling towels are incredibly popular nowadays and very effective for staying cool on the job. Personal fans are an oldie but a goodie. If you have a personal work area and you're allowed to have personal fans, always recommended for those really hot times of the year, as long as you promise to take care of it. Painters, you have some options as well. Talk to your vendors, your suppliers, and you can look online as well, but some of your supplied air systems and PAPRs have cooling tubes or attachments that'll help shoot a little bit cooler air into your hood and down your suit. I always feel bad for you guys because you're wearing these impermeable paint suits, which get incredibly hot. So use the tools that you have available and take some action as an individual, and you might be able to make your work environment a little bit more comfortable just by doing some research and taking action on your own. In conclusion, heat stress is a real concern for workplace safety and health in dealerships. Everyone should have a good idea of what the warning signs are of heat-related illness and when we should take action. And all individuals need to take action proactively to stay safe and cool on the job in hot weather. Thank you.